Thank you. So welcome everyone to our webinar today and to the second edition in a way of a hearing access series. And it is important time of everyone, all users of hearing aids and cochlear implant processors, to be fully informed about the latest advances, but also how those advances might impact on them. And today, I would like everyone who is not speaking to switch off the videos so we preserve the bandwidth. And when you will be speaking, then we will ask you to switch on the video. There is a captioning, and the link to it is in the chat room. And I ask you to click that link so you will be able to also select different languages. This way, you will be able to choose the language you prefer. You can also use a show captions inside the Zoom if you're using mobile device only. It's just good to have a backup in case sometimes Zoom might be delaying captioning. It happens. And next slide. And our housekeeping rules are pretty simple. If you're not speaking, your microphone needs to be muted. When speaking, camera on. And when you want to ask questions, you have two ways of doing it. You can write question in the chat, and when one of our staff, Deria, who is here in the background working, she can pick up that question and read it out for you if you prefer. Or you can just raise your hand in the reactions at the bottom of Zoom, and then we will know that you are waiting to speak. And it would be good if you could introduce your organization, where you're coming from, so we understand which area, which country you're coming from. Okay, so now we can start our main webinar. And can I ask again, those who are not speaking, switch off your video. Otherwise, I will ask staff to switch off your videos. Thank you very much. So for this webinar, we are looking okay, we are looking at the area. We see only a small screen. I would like to see the bigger screen if it's possible, because this captioning is typing is a bit small.
I will try, but I think there's an issue with the slide. Can you see it? I think there's an issue with the slides.
Okay, so if it's technical issue, just go back to the normal way. Okay, let's stick with that one. So today we are looking at the discussion related to the fact that we have come across some of the conversations from our members related to the telecoils, the use of hearing loops, etc., and also Auracast. So just to kick off today's webinar, I will present in nutshell, in a short version, what the European Federation of Hard of Hearing People's statement, which was issued a week ago, is about. First of all, we are all aware that there is a new Bluetooth technology, broadcast technology, which is supposed to replace a typical Bluetooth one-to-one kind of connections. And it's supposed to also revolutionize the way how we access audio. So Auracast is a new technology, but it's still not widely available yet in public spaces. And it is promises that it will revolutionize our hearing access. But, as one of my friends always say, hearing aids and cochlear implant processors, most of them especially, do not have Auracast chip, not yet. And new hearing aids and cochlear implant processors are slowly introducing Auracast in their devices. On top of that, with the process of actual renewal, replacement of the hearing aids and processors, it will take time, at least up to 10 years, to actually, for everyone who has a hearing device, to have Auracast in it. Next slide, please. Telecalls, on the other hand, they are essential access to public services everywhere where telecall-based assistive listening systems are in place. And this means theaters, public events, arenas, music events, all those different places, schools, they all have existing hearing loops, for example, or neck loops, FM systems, which are all operated on, most of them operated on the telecall-based access. So in this way, everyone can access the system if they have telecall activated. But some new hearing aids and cochlear implant processors are sold without the telecalls built in their devices. From our perspective, that is a step backwards. Next slide. So our position is that both telecalls in hearing devices are continuing to provide essential access to quality of sound. And it will take at least a decade before majority of users have Auracast-enabled devices, let alone for the venues to have those systems in place. So we need both. This means to the manufacturers, we plea and ask, keep telecalls in the devices for the next decade, at least. Provision of telecalls in accessories is a step backwards. It requires users to remember additional devices, to actually even to recharge them. And that adds actually to our bills on electricity. So there is a lot of different barriers created that way. And in fact, and that's what we will be discussing today, we believe that Auracast and telecalls can coexist in hearing devices. As well, potentially, that coexistence can also be enabled in actual venues themselves. So, in fact, we need both. Next slide. And lastly, this is our strength, where the manufacturers, hearing loss professionals organization like EFHOH and hearing aid professionals themselves are coming together to come with the same voice to create the same position when it comes to different policy matters. This is also a policy matter, because we need to make sure that policymakers, the decision makers who are providing, for example, direct to the users hearing aids which are in reimbursement systems, for example, or in social services, or whichever way they are being provided, they should have those features really embedded. And we, of course, need the support and help from hearing aid professionals themselves and cochlear implant professionals too, to help us navigate this and to support us in using both for the time being. And that's our plea to everyone. So let's kick off the actual webinar today. And the first person who will be speaking is Johan Hammarström, who is from Sweden. Johan will present his experience in a recent event where he was able to test out if how the coexistence might work when it comes to hearing loops and Auracast telecoils and all those different features. And Johan, if you want to add more in terms of including your presenting yourself, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will share my screen now, and can I have a thumb up if you can see me, which is my first screen with a picture on me.
Good.
Does the sharing work? Okay, very good. Hello, everyone. My name is Johan Hammerstrom. I have a hearing loss myself since birth on both my ears, and I'm using hearing aids. I have a moderate hearing loss. I am working with installation and with technology, with hearing technology since about 15 years. All right, and the company I work for is Transistor, which is a company in Sweden, and I'm living in Sweden. Let's see if you still see the picture of me now, or do you see the slides moving?
It's still on the picture, Johan.
Okay, let's see. I will just make sure to restart the sharing or the presentation. This. Okay. So I have a few pictures from the test we did in Oslo, where we installed Auracast. We had 2 different transmitters that we were using. We also had several people with hearing loss being able to test this new technology as well. We used it was a real theater show where we put this technology in, and it was possible for these users to connect to this Auracast stream. But one important thing here is that not everyone could connect directly to Auracast, as there were only a few people with hearing aids that supported Auracast. Most of the users had other hearing aids, which only had a telecoil or a streamer. And those people had to connect via a neck loop or via a cable to their streamer. And they were provided a receiver unit. So this is the theater hall. And we also put up a monitor which showed for everyone that it was a live Auracast stream available. The same principle as we installed for hearing loops, where everyone can see that the hearing loop is going out, and it was possible for people to see this. It was also possible in the smartphone if you had an app to see the different transmissions. And here is my phone that I used. I could choose between 2 Auracast streams, one with one transmitter and the other one with another transmitter. So there were 2 available streams to be able to compare sound quality, latency, and so on. Generally, it was a good sound delivery. It was a quite short latency of about 35 to 40 milliseconds. And it was a nice way of being able to receive sound directly to the hearing aids for the people who had Auracast in their hearing aids. This picture also shows the sound technicians. It's very common that you don't always have the sound going out on this assistive listening system, as this sound is not tangible for everyone else. So we also had a monitor unit at the sound control point, so that person could, in the sound control point, also can get verification when there is audio coming out. This one Auracast sign lights up. Okay, so what is my experiences so far? I mean, I'm very positive about the development of a new technology, which will be possible for more people in more venues to connect. But there are some really big concerns I have also when it comes to Auracast and hearing loops. For me, with a hearing loop and a telecoil, it's very simple to connect. I don't need a phone. I don't need any specific knowledge about this little bit more complicated technology. It's very simple. I can just push the button on my hearing aid, and that's very easy. Also, it's very important to know that hearing loops are also used for safety. They can be built into elevators. They can be built into trains and buses. So I can get information. If there, for instance, is a fire and smoke in a train, I can listen to the people in this train who are informing me where to go, what to do. This is really an important thing to remember about hearing loops, that they are also for safety, not only for leisure. And it's put into the regulations for many countries, hearing loops. So therefore, it's also very important for me as a user to be able to listen to these safety information. And that is hearing loop. That is not Auracast. Maybe Auracast in the long future, but today and for many years it will be hearing loops. And that is also something that often is forgotten. So we really need to push on that as well. Hearing loops is not only for leisure, it's also for safety. And I can use a hearing loop in many ways. I can also use it with a headphone that has a built-in hearing loop. I can use it with a neck loop that they maybe provide me. So there are a lot of different kind of uses for hearing loops. With the Auracast, it's a really nice thing, I think. I can connect to Auracast broadcast like I can connect to a Wi-Fi, but there is one big difference. Wi-Fi is more automatic. Auracast is not automatic. It's still about using a microphone. It's still about switching on the sound for the sound technician. So it's still this thing that people really need to understand when the audio is going out, as I showed you in the presentation slide before from the theater. It's the monitoring thing is really important thing for everyone to understand when it's function. Okay, so I did this, I will go through very quickly, but there are many different options now as a user that I get. I can get a hearing aid likely in the future with Auracast in, but I can also get a hearing aid with a telecoil in. So what should I ask for? I should ask for a hearing aid with both Auracast and telecoil built in. It's really, really important, and we know that it works. We have heard that from the manufacturers of hearing aids, and we will probably hear it today more, that you can use a hearing aid that has both. And there are also hearing aids that don't have telecoils built in, but maybe they have a telecoil here, but that is not a telecoil equipped hearing aid. So it makes it not possible to connect, for instance, to these safety systems that requires me to have the telecoil here more or less. And the thing is that not everyone get these units prescribed, and you don't always remember to carry this on. And it becomes complicated to connect to the hearing loop if you have the telecoil here. So I would not suggest any hearing aid manufacturer to make such solution, because that is not a hearing aid with a telecoil. Okay, there are also, of course, many risks of bringing in this new technology. Always risks comes with new things, and we should be, of course, very concerned that we don't miss out all the accessibility because the hearing aid manufacturers remove the telecoils. There are hundreds of thousands of hearing loops in the world, and it's really, really important that telecoils remains. And of course, there is a big risk that we get hearing aids only with these Auracast. And the other thing, the risk is that there will be many hybrid systems which will not be very useful for many people, because hybrid systems with both transmitting on hearing loop and on Auracast might be a neck loop that I don't know where to pick up, which is just a tick box for someone who says they have a hearing loop. A real hearing loop is a loop where you can go in and get direct sound to your hearing aids. And that is a real hybrid system. And that was what also we showed in Oslo, that a real hybrid system is a real hearing loop and a real Auracast, and not a neck loop solution. We tested that as well, but that brings much complexity to this system and to this solution. So I really push and hope that we can push together for a hybrid system consisting of real hearing loops and of Auracast. Okay, and also what is very important is that no chain is stronger than its weakest links. And both Auracast and hearing loops is a chain of links that needs to work all the time for us to be able to hear. It needs to be a speaker who uses a phone, a microphone. It needs to be many links depending on the sound system where the sound should go before it lands in our hearing aid. And if this link is not monitored, it will be for sure that this hearing loop system will sooner or later be a problem, because people will forget to switch on the microphone. People will forget to plug in a cable into the power outlet. So monitoring is now in the standard for hearing loops, and every hearing loop should be equipped with monitors, because then you will be able to, for everyone, non-technical staff and for the audience, to verify the function in real time. So that is really critical also for Auracast, because Auracast will be the same thing. It's invisible, yes, more people can listen to it, but the difference is that normal hearing people, they just switch over to their normal hearing, and us hard of hearing people will not hear anything and have to leave the theater or whatever it is if the Auracast doesn't work. So it's a big risk that Auracast also will be tick box, just something you say you have, but it doesn't work. So this is valid for both Auracast and for hearing loops, that we really need to make sure these systems are working out there on a daily basis. Okay, many thanks. That is my presentation, and I will give the word to you, Lydia, and to continue.
Many thanks, Johan, for bringing in the user's perspective in such simple and accessible way. And this is also my experience, and I believe a lot of people experiences when it comes to telecoils and assistive listening devices is similar, especially when we told that we are the problem, when we are complaining that something is not right when it comes to assistive devices, in the public places. The next speaker is Andrew Thomas. Andrew Thomas is in London, and he is the president of the International Hearing Loop Manufacturers Association. And Andrew will tackle the important topic of coexistence in the public services, especially where already hearing loops are also installed. So Andrew, if you want to introduce a little bit more about yourself, please feel free if it's not enough, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lydia, and thank you, Johan, there for an excellent presentation. Very interesting to hear from a user perspective of your experience there. So next slide, please. I think we've jumped one there, but that's fine. So as Lydia said, my name's Andrew Thomas. I'm a director of a company called Contacta, based in the UK. We're manufacturers of assistive listening systems. And we work primarily in the UK with the service provider to provide equipment for them to install in their venue or the bank that they represent. And it's really surprising how much misinformation is out there about new technologies that are coming along. So I think it's really important that we look at this subject, coexistence with technologies. And if you look at this particular slide I've got up here, we're just an overview of the technologies that are kind of considered to be assistive listening. So we've got hearing loop, we've got infrared, we've got RF, radio frequency. There's obviously Wi-Fi that's come into the scene a few years ago, which some of the venues it's used in is considered as assistive listening, and obviously Auracast is coming down the track, which we'll be talking about today. Next slide, please. Coexistence with hearing loops and, for example, infrared systems has been going on for some time in London's West End theatres, for example. So there's a high number of theatres in the West End that have these two technologies used. And this is an example on this website here from the National Theatre in London, on their website, that highlights they have both infrared technology and hearing loop technology. And it's important, I think, going forward as we progress in the future, that the service providers take responsibility for informing people of what they have as far as assistive listening technologies in their venues. Next slide, please. There was something that Johan touched on in his presentation, which was really, I think, important, and that is there's existing standards in place that have been around for some time. And he mentioned about the issue of assistance when there's alarms, etc., etc. So this slide here takes a snap of the British standard BS 8300, where it shows specific use of loop systems, and it's not just in the one-to-many application that Auracast was mentioned in Johan's presentation in the theatre, for example. There are specific examples of one-to-one situations, like a bank counter or a supermarket or a pharmacy counter, where one-to-one loops are used. And at the moment, I don't believe Auracast is able to overcome those kind of uses of assistive listening. When you look at the help points or the refuge points where hearing loops are used as well, these are set in stone in standard. So it would be difficult to tear up these standards because a new technology comes along but can't fulfill them. So these are about being accessible, and they're an important part of how assistive listening technologies are used. Next slide, please. This slide is another example of a standard. It's from the European standard EN 17210. And it's just basically a counter demonstrating that there is a hearing loop required where a glazed screen is used on a counter. Again, these standards are in place. This particular standard took many years for all the European countries to agree what was required, and will be updated at some point in the future. So there's also a cycle of when these standards will be updated, and it's important that they are used in a way that assists and keeps the accessibility open for people to use them. Next slide, please. So we are in an age where we are all growing older. We're living longer, and a couple of the stats that are coming out in recent months are very interesting to look at how new technology will fit in with some of these statistics. With regard to the first one there, 80% of people in the UK are aged over 70 will have a hearing loss, which comes through age. In 2023, the over 65s accounted for more than 1/5 of the EU population. That's a huge number. And we know, just as we all get older, that there's a decline in manual dexterity and cognitive function that cause considerable impairments as we head towards our later years. These are kind of facts of life that we have to deal with. Next slide, please. And there's a lot of talk around smartphones and how smartphones are used to access assistive technologies. So this report came out from Age UK this year. Shows a significant amount of people use a smartphone, but there's also a significant amount of people that don't. And these are the numbers that I think are quite striking from the amount of people that don't have access to a smartphone or don't use a smartphone, particularly when we're looking at how new technologies will be accessed. And the point that Johan was making about keeping it simple, I think, is a very, very valid one, and something we need to really embrace as we go forward. Next slide, please. So this led to some more investigation online about the use of smartphones, and I came across this information regarding the United States of America, that 95% of people have cell phones, 81%, just over, have smartphones. But when it goes to the over 65s, it was interesting that this particular survey, which came out this year, the use of smartphones was considerably down, much more than I expected. I'm not sure how accurate it is, but it's clearly in line a little bit with the UK information that was on the previous slide. And it was interesting, again, the last point there about urban area smartphone usage, how the techno savvy people in the suburban residents was very high, and maybe the people who have retired out into rural areas, the usage was lower. Really interesting information that you can get from online, and there's also other information on this particular website about use in other countries. It's not just about the UK or the US. There's a real wealth of information there about smartphone usage, which I think needs to be considered going forward. And the next slide, please. So one of my other roles is to be the chairman of the International Hearing Loop Manufacturers Association. And one thing that we are actively going ahead with is we're going to rebrand ourselves so that we embrace other technologies and other assistive listening stakeholders, if you like, in the industry. And already it's been mentioned about audiologists, the service providers who install the equipment in their venues, the installers themselves, the specifiers, the architects that specify equipment. These are the kind of people that we all want to get into this new body. We want to be able to give the right kind of messaging to the industry from a whole wide range of different people that have input into the industry. So it's important that we get as many of a cross section of stakeholders into this new association. We're looking to get that over the line either before the end of the year or the first part of next year. And I would really ask anyone who's involved in the industry and any bodies that are represented, the HLAA, for example, that's been mentioned already today, HEMA, EFHOH, etc. We want to be working closely with you guys to come up with guidance and educate a whole plethora of different people that need information about new technologies. So yes, the new technologies are coming down the line, the Auracast is coming down the line. We need to work together, we need to coexist, and we need to make it as accessible as we can for all the people that are out there that require access to assistive listening. So that's my short, brief presentation. I thank you very much for your time, and I hand you back to Lydia.
Thank you, Andrew, for this excellent presentation, and I hope it does provide some information to everyone on what to expect. And also thank you for sharing the information of your rebranding. Just to inform everyone that we continue with our webinar, and this time we will have a time for the panel discussion where all your questions will be shared as well, and the speakers will be able to respond directly. Our next speaker is Nikolai Biscard, a good friend of mine for many, many years as well. And Nikolai is a consultant for the European Association of Hearing Aids. Is European Hearing Instrument Manufacturers Association. Yes, there are so many long names, including ours, but it can be confusing, so apologies for that. Nikolai, if you want to add a little bit more about yourself, feel free, and the floor is yours.
Sure. Yeah. I'm Nikolai Biscard. I have worked in the hearing aid industry for more than 40 years, mostly in product development. And now in my later years, I have assumed the role of consultant to EHEMA, working in particular on Auracast that I years ago thought about as a great opportunity. And now it's finally materializing, so it's actually very exciting to be part of this. And let me use my time here to give you some insights into the process that we are running to get this moving. And let's just have the next slide, if we can. Yeah. Bluetooth LE audio is a whole new generation of Bluetooth that was developed over a period from 2013 to 2019. It was really a major effort. It was initiated to some degree, and not completely, but to some degree by the hearing aid industry, who approached the Bluetooth organization and said that we would like hearing aids to be Bluetooth recognized devices. That was one strong wish, and the other one was that we would like them to introduce this broadcast mode that is the basis of Auracast. And that was received quite well, and it just took a very long time to get it going. And we also pointed out that the codec that is normally used in Bluetooth for streaming audio is a relatively slow old fellow, and we needed a new, more modern codec. And the codec is the system that encodes an audio signal into packets, transmits it picks it up, puts them together, and then render the sound at the other end. And the desire was to get something with better quality and with lower latency and less power consumption as well. And all of that was really sort of taken up as a good challenge. And the only annoying thing is that it took so many years. But now it's here and it can do a lot. And I mean, listening to some of the other speakers, I can clearly see that there's a lot of things we haven't done with Auracast yet. But I may remind you at this stage that we have lived with loop systems, hearing loops, for the past 50 years. And a lot of things have been developed and refined and installed over those 50 years. When we look at Auracast, we're just in the beginning of this. There isn't much that Auracast can't do, but of course it hasn't all been developed yet. We are still in the very early part where people focus on the most important functions, and there will be plenty of opportunity over the next decade to develop all sorts of specialized solutions for particular situations and so on. Okay, let's have the next slide. Yeah, and I think one of the exciting things about the Bluetooth LE Audio and Auracast system, and Auracast is sort of a subset of Bluetooth. Bluetooth is an amazing animal that can do all sorts of things. There is thousands of pages of specifications and opportunities, and that is nice in some ways, but when you want to have a lot of people talking to each other, it's not nice to have this great flexibility. So what we have done is we've defined Auracast as a subset of the Bluetooth capability that is used to communicate audio signals to people in public and private spaces. So you can see some of the examples here. You can share audio from a laptop, for instance, to not just one person, but to several people sitting there watching the same movie. We will be able, I think, in airports also to have the opportunity to connect to a gate. And here is, I think, one of the interesting properties of the Bluetooth system is that you can actually hook up to it. And then your receiving device will know that it's hooked up to it. But when nothing is happening, your microphone in the hearing aid is still going to be your primary input source. But when the attendant at the gate picks up the microphone and starts talking, your Bluetooth receiver in the hearing aid will recognize that now there is activity on the transmitter you link to. And now you will hear that on top of your other signals, or maybe it will just sort of replace the signal you otherwise listen to. That's one of the interesting opportunities that would also work for in emergency situations. And then it's possible to put these transmitters in parallel. You can have 4 TV sets with each transmitter sending out the audio of each of the TVs, and people will be able to connect to the one they like, which is not truly so easy with hearing loops, because they sort of mix into each other if you put them on top of each other. Auracast is a digital system where each stream is encoded, so you can tell the difference and pick the one you would like. Yes, so let's have the next slide. But the key thing for assistive listening is, of course, the broadcasting mode. And I mean, the way it works is that you have your AV system, the box to the left, and you take a simple 3mm plug and plug into one of the outputs there, and you connect it to the Auracast transmitter that sits on the wall. And then everyone in that room will be able to receive the signal if they have the right devices. Of course, we need to have people equipped with Auracast-enabled receivers, hearing aids, earbuds, bone-anchored, and CIs. And all that is, of course, not in place. I'm very convinced that it will emerge over the next couple of years. We will see more and more of those, and one day it will be the majority of all hearing aids that are enabled with this. And the simplicity of doing what is shown here is, of course, an attraction that you don't need to wire the entire room. Okay, let's have the next slide. The the key thing about the broadcast mode is that there are two streams going out from the transmitter. One stream is the audio signal, and the other stream is the so-called advertisements, where data on how to connect to this audio stream is also transmitted in parallel with the audio. So your hearing aid or other device will be able to read that information and set up the receiver in the hearing aid in such a way that you can listen to the signal. That is also part of the complication because you need to have some sort of device that can do this. And the hearing aids can do it themselves, but it's also clear that some sort of assisting device would be easier in a number of ways, and I'll get back to that. So let's take the next slide. See, this is not a small project in the sense that we are talking about dozens of manufacturers. We're going to put products onto the market, and the demand we have, or the dream we have, is that they should be able to interact completely flawlessly, regardless of what combination of products that you bring about. And that sounds kind of easy when you say it, but it is not easy. It requires discipline, it requires testing requirements to be fulfilled, and so on. And this is why we have also now started a project to create this new IEC standard that defines how this is supposed to happen. And let's have the next slide. The scope of this new standard is that Auracast is really a technology for transmitting audio signals to hearing aids. And in that sense, it is an analog to the loop system telecoil combination. It's just a different technology, but the purpose is the same: to take an audio signal from the source and send it to the hearing aids. And we have chosen that all the things that surround this, the design of the audio system, how many microphones, how do you mix the different sources, what about your loudspeakers, visual indicators, and what have you, all of that is not really part of this particular standard, because we are focusing on getting the transmission channel between the transmitter and the hearing aids to be perfectly well defined and testable. So we are suggesting that the ILMA organization or other people try to put together a generic standard for how do you design an assistive listening system in a proper way, and you can have several different transmission technologies built into it. That's not to be written in each of the transmission technology standards, is our view from the hearing aid industry. Let's have the next slide. The topics in this new standard are, of course, not surprising. We need to have requirements on the hearing aids. They must live up to certain standards on sensitivity to the radio frequency signals. They should be having the lowest possible latency, and of course the frequency response should also be aligned with the other sources that you put into the hearing aids. That is, by the way, not very difficult. Because the transmitters also have requirements. They must put out the proper advertising so the receivers can pick up the data. And there is a number of additional data sets that we can put into it. And one of them is this one called assisted listening stream. You can tag the stream as being an assisted listening stream, which should enable hearing aids to pick it up by default. And the reason I'm a little hesitant to just say it very sort of authoritatively is that nobody is so far said they will do this. It is a technical opportunity, but we will see. The latency also is influenced by the transmitter, and that has to be as short as possible too. The output power should be configurable, because you don't, if you have a small room, you don't need to blast it with 20 milliwatts. That will cover an area of maybe 50 by 50 meters. If you only need to cover 10 by 10, you should reduce the power. And very importantly also, there should be a way of verifying that the transmitter performance is proper. Can we test that the whole area is covered? And can we test that the audio signals have the right level? If we can do that, we can also say to the users, in this room, there will be coverage with Auracast. Some test equipment might also be handy. I mean, it's not terribly difficult to make an app that the staff at the venue can have and go out and check that it's actually working. Might be an opportunity as well. Let's have another slide. Yes. Can Auracast and loop systems coexist? Absolutely. They don't disturb each other at all. They are two different technologies, and they can easily transmit the same signals in parallel. The Auracast system can do a few more things, like have maybe two different languages or stereo and stuff like that. But I mean, basically, they can be there, both of them, and there's nothing saying that it will disturb each other. I know that a lot of people praise the hearing loops a lot. I will say I meet a lot of people also who say that they go to certain venues where the loop system is very, very poor quality because of interference from electrical appliances at the same place. And that is a nuisance I think a lot of people do experience. That type of disturbance will not happen with Auracast because it's a digitally coded system. So if it's there, you will hear it clearly. If it's not, you won't hear it. But you will not hear it in a poor quality with all sorts of interference. And it's also clear that the industry is quite focused on introducing Auracast on all hearing aids, because the Bluetooth system is integral to all hearing aids, whereas the induction pickup coil is something that needs to be added and designed, and it's not easy, I can tell you, particularly not for power hearing aids. So there is, I won't deny that, a strong inclination towards making Auracast the future system. But it's also clear that there will be a lot of people using the loop systems and the telecoils, and that will be serviced, I'm pretty sure. I can't just, as a consultant to the industry, promise anything on that. Let's see the next slide. Yeah, so, you know, basically what we will see in the future is most likely that a place that has a hearing loop will have another thing put up on the wall, the Auracast transmitter. And there's nothing technically complicated about doing that, really. It's quite easy. And I have nothing against that, absolutely not. So let's see the next slide. A lot of people ask, how far can the Auracasts reach? And I mean, we've seen some amazing results at the recent EFHOH convention in Germany. We could put up a transmitter. You can walk to the far end of the exhibit hall, and you can still hear it. It works really well. And I would say rooms of 30 by 50 meters easily. If you put the transmitter in the right place, you can cover the entire room. Outdoors, it doesn't go quite as well because there are no reflections to keep the radio energy inside the room. So the coverage will be a little less. And for really large room, it is possible to put up a number of transmitters with the same audio signal and the same label. And users can then decide to connect to one of several sources. The problem is to know which one. There is some technical work to be done there on how you most effectively manage multi-transmitter environments. And that is being worked at, but it's not done yet. Next slide, please. Yes, how do you connect to Auracast? This has been subject to a lot of debate. And it is, as I said, technically possible for a hearing aid to search and connect without the use of assistant devices. We have this assisted listening stream label that can be looked for. The problem is, of course, if you have several sources at the same place, how do you decide if you have no other way than just pushing a button on the hearing aid. There is definitely a problem there. And the most favorite solution is using a phone as an assistant device. And we know that a lot of hearing aid companies, all hearing aid companies, I think, put out an app that you can use with their hearing aids so you can control them in a more sophisticated way. And that app will definitely be extended with an Auracast function, so you can look for the transmissions, you can decide which one you want to listen to, and then you can adjust the volume with the microphone and the transmit and so on. All of that you already know from the telecoils as well. Some recent developments have led to the fact that you can actually use older phones. You don't need to have a phone that is with the most recent version of Bluetooth installed, because you can look at your phone and say to the phone, please find sources, and the phone will tell the hearing aid to look for the sources. And once this hearing aid has done that, it will send the information to the phone, and you will see a display where you can see the sources that it found, and you can decide which one to connect to. And then the phone will tell that to the hearing aid, even if the phone is not a Bluetooth LE audio phone, which is nice. There's also an opportunity to scan QR codes. I know that is still using the phone. And yes, I know that there are people who are not capable of using the phones. I will think, though, from the data that was shown earlier, that as people age, we will see more and more people who used to use phones a lot will move into the older ages, and there will be a higher percentage. I can tell you in Denmark, they are going to decommission the analog phone system in a year. If you want to talk to anybody on the phone in Denmark, you will need a mobile phone. Period. So I don't think they would do that if 300,000 people were left on the platform and couldn't talk to anybody. So it is going in that direction. And yes, it will be a problem to some. But on the other hand, we're also opening up a lot of opportunities for a lot of other people in this way. So let's see the next slide. That was the last slide. So I hope I gave you some perspective on this, and I will just end this by saying that please remember that this is a novel technology, and we are moving into this space, developing different types of functionalities. I mean, ultimately, it should also be possible in some years to have a hearing aid that can remember a transmitter you previously connected to, so you don't have to do it actively. It could probably recognize it's there and say, this is my favorite, I'll just connect to it without using my phone, for instance. A lot of these things are possible. It hasn't been done yet because, as you know, software is easy to talk about, but it's not so easy to do. And a lot of work goes into this, and I'm sure we will see many more interesting functions and improvements and so on. And in the meantime, the hearing loops and the telecoils are going to help a lot of people do what they need to do, and I think that is how it's going to be for a while. In 15 years from now, I think we will have a lot of Auracasts out there, but how fast it goes, really hard to tell. We are moving as fast as we can and trying to push it because we think it has a lot of benefits. And yeah, so that was that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nikolai. It's important to bring the manufacturer's perspective as well, but also the Bluetooth group perspective. And we know that there's been ongoing work started by Soren Hugard for many, many years ago. And we had the discussion. We understand as well where you are coming from, given the issues with Bluetooth as well, all these different versions we have had. And I think when you can look at the chat, when you have a moment, there is lots of questions and concerns too. But the biggest concern for us is that some places are removing even hearing loop, thinking Auracast is already ready for everybody and everybody can use it. So I think it's very, very important that we continue our message to say, no, we need both for a time being, because it does take time and we all need to work together. I would like now to invite our wonderful Anova friend. We are all friends here, actually. No enemies, absolutely no. We all work together. So this is next speaker is Juliet Sterkens, who is Dutch, actually, but living in United States for many, many years, who is herself a retired audiologist and a consultant for Hearing Loss Association of America. And she is an avid advocate, and we met so many years ago, and she's an amazing speaker. So Juliet, your floor, please.
Thank you very much. And before the slides get up, my background goes to 1979 as a speech-language pathologist in the Netherlands. And then in 83, I obtained my audiology degree in the United States. So it's been a long time. It's hard to believe. And I'm hoping that my slides will get up on the screen in a second, but I think I bring a very unique perspective to this presentation. My work is not just about hearing loops. I've really pivoted to ensure that consumers are aware how important it is to have telecoils in their hearing aids and how important T-coils are going to be while Auracast matures. And hearing loop installations are still on the increase in the United States, but they vary from state to state. But because of our ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, there are thousands of venues that use FM or infrared systems with neck loops. It's mandated by the American law. So obviously for years, can you go to the next slide, please? For years, consumers will need telecoils in their hearing aids for communication access. And just like Johan and just like Lydia mentioned, I am all for telecoils inside hearing aids. I was initially very excited about seeing T-coils in accessories, but I have found that for consumers, they are an obstacle. They really don't work as well as we would like them. They can work, however. And that's what I have on this slide, the choices of telecoil-equipped hearing aids is dwindling. And I am now getting emails from audiologists who have embraced informing their patients about assistive technology, that they can't find hearing aids that have telecoils and Auracast but are rechargeable or are not rechargeable. A lot of consumers don't want rechargeable hearing aids. Next slide, please. So it is my understanding that Auracast really can be used two different ways. The first way is Auracast broadcast audio for audio sharing. And as an audiologist, I am very excited about the interoperability of Auracast for audio sharing, receiving direct sound from TVs and laptops and non-proprietary remote accessories, I believe will be revolutionary for patients. However, the second use of Auracast broadcast audio used as part of an assistive listening system, something that we've abbreviated as Auracast ALS, is promising, but is really far from reality. And I'm finding that a lot of audiologists are confusing the two. They think if a hearing aid is Auracast, then these hearing aids will instantly be able to receive assistive listening and be used on the smartphones. And as an audiologist, I want to make 2 points in this meeting here. I've heard claims that because Auracast is stereo, it is therefore better and has even been demanded by some consumers. Now, that may be so for when you're watching a movie or listening to music, but for assistive listening, this is marketing hype. No consumer in a courtroom or in a lecture has ever said, boy, I am really missing out here because the proceedings were not in stereo. assistive listening is not happening in stereo. That's the first point. The second point, professionally, I have fit thousands of hearing aids, and I've counseled thousands of patients in the use of hearing aids with their smartphones. And I have dealt with so many connectivity issues with hearing aids, and new hearing aid rollouts are rarely as smooth as the marketing department promises. And I don't know about you, but about once or twice a month, my Bluetooth microphone and earphones have a glitch, and suddenly they will not receive any sound. So to think that Auracast will be flawless without any problems, most likely that's not going to happen. Next slide, please. So yes, of course, these systems are going to have to coexist. They're going to coexist by choice. Venues are going to choose to install a certain system, but because of all the marketing hype, I am now getting messages and emails from venues that were all set to put a hearing loop in, only to say, we hear that Auracast is coming. Why would we spend the money on an expensive hearing loop installations when Auracast is just around the corner? So that's really a source of frustration on my part when I'm counseling consumers and venues. Indeed, just like everybody else has been mentioning, we're going to see these systems used as a supplement where there is a hearing loop, and once there are enough users in a community with Auracast in their hearing devices, we're going to see an Auracast system installed in addition to the hearing loop or the FM system with neck loops. But it is going to require some technical staff. And because Auracast in itself is not an assistive listening system, it's merely a type of Bluetooth transmission, a way to get the sound to the hearing aid, but it's really only a part of the assistive listening system. Next slide, please. So what is needed for Auracast ALS to be available and usable for people with hearing loss? Number one, we need the international standard 60118-17, which is not scheduled to be released until December 27. And it will include all kinds of technical information to make sure that the hearing aids and the transmitters can work together. I believe that it is important that we wait for the IEC standard because we have a hearing loop standard, because poor installations gave hearing loops a bad reputation, and poor hearing loops caused hearing loop sales to suffer. In the US, we are still dealing with that undeserved reputation that telecoils and hearing loops don't sound good. Now, I have listened to hundreds of hearing loops with hearing aids, and I can say where hearing loops installed are to the IEC standard, hearing loops sound absolutely awesome. So Auracast installations should not be pushed before the IEC standard is finished and all the hearing aid and cochlear implant connectivities are issued. And I'm glad Nikolai mentioned that there will be a dedicated Auracast assistive listening stream for Auracast transmitters. And having been involved with assistive listening for decades now, I have learned that consumers with hearing loss do not need any ordinary sound stream. They need a unique sound mix where speech and SNR, the signal-to-noise ratio, are enhanced, where background noise and music is reduced, and where the sound stream volume is carefully balanced with automatic gain control. We also need third-party verification. We need studies. We need proof, and they need to be done with reputable third-party organizations that include people with hearing loss, because people with hearing loss need more than the claims from the hearing aid manufacturers. And regarding the equipment and the installers, obviously installers are going to need training. The manufactured equipment needs to meet that IEC standard, but we also need a development, or at least some type of technology that allows the consumer to use Auracast at service desk or at help points or maybe at elevators like Johan mentioned earlier. These assistive listening systems need to be integrated. The Auracast ALS needs to be integrated with existing AV systems. This is not a simple plug and pray, or should I say plug and play. This is, as far as I've worked with AV engineers, and to get the sound right is important. Audio needs to be integrated if there is an existing assistive listening system. This is not just a simple plug it in or a Y-splitter connect. From what I understand, it is complex. And again, Nikolai mentioned all the transmitters and the receivers and the hearing aids and the cochlear implants and the earbuds must all be able to work together so that they can be used together. And I ask you, with all these different devices, what could possibly go wrong? So this is not something that we should be pushing for the next year or two. This is going to take a significant amount of time. Next slide, please. So what's needed for Auracast ALS to be available and usable for people with hearing loss? We need some careful studies as to what the end-to-end latency is all about. We may be hearing that there is a 30 or 40 millisecond audio delay, but once we include microphones and the sound systems and the audio-visual equipment and the soundboards and the transmission and the smartphones and the hearing aids, what will be the total audio delay? And we need some answers as far as that's concerned. And of course, with hearing instruments, we're going to need hearing aids that have not only Auracast but are telecoil compatible so that consumers will be able to use the hearing loop in their church, but Auracast in the theater that was recently installed. And I am a huge proponent of technology where the user simply has to push the button. And I'm specifically thinking of my mother, who is using hearing aids at 97, who can still be reminded to push the button for her telecoil, but is in no way, shape, or form able to find an app on a smartphone, or let alone find the correct audio stream. And then I would also like to see the hearing aids develop so that there will be apps or capability to make it a microphone and Auracast mix capability, or the capability to quickly switch back and forth. And as an audiologist, I know how important it is that consumers are able to hear their own voice when they're speaking, when they're singing, when they're in a meeting where they need to hear table mates to their left and right, and also hear the sound that's coming from the stage. And then, of course, we're talking about the user. Users, and was happy to hear from Nikolai that it may not be needed that they get a new smartphone, but what will be needed is that they all get new or updated hearing aids. And obviously purchasing new hearing aids is going to take, replacing older hearing aids is going to take 4, 5, 6, 7 years. For cochlear implants, that can even be a little bit longer. And consumers need to be educated by their audiologist about this technology. And this is where I really think that EFHOH can make a difference. We need to see standardized information in user guides that informs and educates the consumer, but also will make it easier for the hearing care professional that they can direct the patient to that information. We also need videos, of course, demoing the use of telecoils and Auracast on websites. And I would think that the standard, the EN 15927 in Europe will require updating to not only mandate that European hearing care professionals demonstrate the benefits of telecoils, which I would like to see how many professionals in Europe actually do this. But it will also need to say something about the use of Bluetooth technology. Next slide, please. So unquestionably, we're going to need Auracast and telecoils in hearing aids for a long time. I'm going to be beating that drum. I have been beating that drum, and I have to be honest. I've been very vocal to the hearing aid manufacturers. I had relationships with most major hearing aid manufacturers. And then to find out that they're still eliminating telecoils for the consumers who are the very reason why they are in existence. Hearing aid companies produce a product for consumers who have hearing loss. And then to find out that these products are eliminating features that consumers find beneficial, I can't help it, but I find it disappointing. So I hope EHIMA, I also of EFHOH, I also hope that HLAA will be on this bandwagon to beat the drum that the hearing aid manufacturers provide hearing aids that are of the superfecta model, meaning they have a nice small form factor, that they include telecoils, include Auracast, that they come in rechargeable devices as well as disposable battery devices, and in various power levels. If one company can do it, why not every hearing aid company? Next slide, please. My last slide. I'm going to direct some people for some of this information to the Center for Hearing Access. That website is perhaps well known, hearingloop.org, where you can find a number of these handouts, a number of points that I've made. And I am happy to work with anybody who wants to reach out to the hearing aid manufacturers to let our desires known. So having said that, I'm going to pass the microphone on to Mark.
Thank you very much, Juliet. It was a very,
My
very
pleasure.
good time to listen to you and to hear your views. So without much ado, an awful long-term friend of EFHOH, working with us constantly and collaborating on many different areas when it comes to hearing loss, policy, and etc. And actually, I'm seeing one of the comments going on and in the actual chat room, which are very much about audiologists and how they can support people in navigating all this landscape. So Mark, you are the president of the European Association of Hearing Aids Professionals, and you work in the standardization as well as in the policy making field. So floor is yours.
Thank you so much for this kind introduction, Lydia, and thank you all for all these very interesting presentations and talks. I hope you can see my slides clearly, and let's then move on. And as promised, I won't tell you too much about myself. This is more about what we want to communicate on and what we want to do. Okay. Now, I'm going to talk about the audiologist view, and let me be fair, I think that, yes, of course, the teleloop and the telecoils are great technology, and I think we shouldn't stop using them for sure. I think our proposal is from now on, if you do something, well, make sure that the loops are working properly, that they give good quality. And the moment you have an option to do so, just add the Auracast transmitter to it. I think that would be the best solution for a long time now. Now, when you talk about the audiologist view, it also depends on what kind of fitting you're in. So I would imagine that a lot of members of EFHOH would be members that are using hearing aids since a while. So mostly you have a hearing loss that is exceeding 40-50 dB on average. And then you will see that if you use hearing aids, you typically use close fitting, so a closed ear mold. So all the information that is going to the ear on all the frequencies are passing by the hearing aid. And that includes also when you are using your telecoil or when you are using Auracast, the full bandwidth, all the frequencies will be directly directed to the hearing aid or to the cochlear implant, because that's about a comparable system. Now, next to that, we also have people we fit that have very good conserved low frequencies and only have a hearing loss in the high frequencies. And at that moment, it's a kind of a different story. Then we use what you call open fitting. So we leave the ear open. The high frequencies are amplified and that is transmitted to the ear, but the low frequencies pass undisturbed into the ear canal. Now, the consequence is that we don't have amplification for those frequencies, which means that there's no amplification here. So the signal from Auracast, the signal from the teleloop, the signal from made for iPhone and made for Android is not going to be passed on the low frequency side, only for the high frequencies. And that is creating some issues from time to time. So sorry, we have to introduce it this way, but we have to see that there's a variety of users we have to serve, and we need to cook for their needs and make sure they get the best possible solution. Now, I want to share an article and some results from a good friend of ours, Jennifer Groth, who we have worked with for many years. And the question was, what do owners of hearing aids that stream think of the sound quality? Now, what is really interesting to begin with is in that publication, which is not that old, 87 users of streaming use it only for phone calls. That's the majority. And maybe to listen to some videos on their smartphone and to video calls. So that's what they use it most, and very little for what we're talking about today. Next to that, what kind of coupling do they have? Well, in that study, 9% was using the traditional closed fitting, and 37% was using open fitting. And then there was a mix of in-between solutions at that moment. Now, when you talk about the description of the sound quality, it's interesting to see that a lot of people think that the sound is thin sound or not loud enough. And that's about the same percentage as the percentage with open fitting, which is, by the way, not so surprising. And then looking is what are the desired improvements? Well, typically, they want more bass. They want more low frequency information to come in. Now, I know the conclusion of this article was more that people are on average happy with the sound quality. If I see people being not happy without some aspects, I'm getting concerned, and I want to be sure that we are offering the best solutions to our customers at that moment. Now, if you use amplification for all frequencies, and there's a wide band of information going to a loudspeaker, that information will come into your microphone and will automatically be amplified. And people are happy as far as you can be happy with the best possibility of what we can amplify in your ear. The moment there's an open fitting, it's a different story, because you get low frequencies directly in the ear without passing through the hearing aid. The high frequencies will be amplified by the hearing aid and will come in here. And if you have acceptable lower delays, then everybody will be happy and you will have a good result. Now, delays, and I've seen many delay discussions in the chat, and that is why I will just spend a little more time on delays, explaining what it is and why it matters. So you have seen that in the specification, also in the standard in development, they really want the latency to be as short as possible, to be less than 30-40 milliseconds. And that is not surprising, because we know that that's a critical number. Interesting enough, Auracast can also adjust the parameters on the stream. They can make it longer, and you would wonder why. I'll tell you in a second. And of course, the idea is that the broadcasted sound, direct sound, should arrive at the same time as the sound coming from the loudspeakers. Here's a technical sheet. Won't go into that. And then there's a few discussions, because what do you talk about when you talk about delay? And sometimes we refer to lip sync, right? And that is in fact handled by an ITU standard. And Lydia is also working at ITU. So there's a special standard on this because ITU is the International Telecommunications Union. And you can imagine that for ITU, broadcasting is important. And the fact that the sound arriving and the visuals arriving at the same time can be quite critical. They have a standard looking into this. And interesting enough, if you look at the left side, that is what you call delay. So when you talk about lip sync, is there a problem between the movements of the lips and the fact that there's an issue? What kind of delay does it cause? Well, if it's a delay about up to 100 milliseconds, it's undetectable. You won't detect the difference. The moment that you reach 125 milliseconds, then it becomes detectable, but it stays acceptable until 185. And these are specialized users. This is what the standard is describing, what audiovisual systems need to do. Interesting enough, the other side, imagine that the sound is faster than the image, which can occur if you don't do it decently, then we are much more sensitive. So it is detectable from 45 milliseconds onwards that there is a mismatch, is the sound is too fast. And it's only acceptable up to 90 milliseconds if the sound is faster than the lips. So that's kind of the other way around. Next, what about the issue of getting direct sound in an open fitting and then getting amplified sound through a transmission system? And there's been few studies on this. Also, Phonak has looked into this, and they have showed this here. So they look at what kind of delay is well accepted. 13, 33, all is well accepted. From 45 onwards, there's a few, there's 20% who do no longer accept it, and more than 100 is a real problem. If we look, and we've done a few studies on this one, we have seen that a total delay of 40 seconds, then people start to notice that they perceive an echo, which starts slightly to be bothering. So 40 milliseconds onwards, that's a given. And that is why probably Auracast is focusing so much to stay under those 40 milliseconds, because that's what you want to avoid. But it's much more important for people with open fitting, milder hearing loss, because they will get direct sound and the streamed sound separately into the system, and that is what needs to match. For a closed fitting, that's a different story because you will normally see both. Now, talking about delays, you need to be quite careful because, in fact, sound takes some time to transmit. So this is an example of a large venue, and there's a sound transmitted here, a loudspeaker, right? A huge loudspeaker, or events, you see it's like this, and it's transmitting that over this hall, and it's the room is 100 meters long. Okay, now how does sound travel? Well, in fact, the natural sound delay is 30.3 milliseconds for every 10 meters. So here we have calculated that. So if you're at a 10-meter distance, the sound, the natural sound, will be delayed 30 milliseconds. If you're at 20 meters, it will be delayed 61 milliseconds. If it's 50, it will be 152 milliseconds. And if it's 100, the delay of the natural sound, so not including any streaming, nothing at all, that is just the sound traveling to the room, will take 303 milliseconds. Now, if you are using systems, if you are using a telecall with very low delays, and we agree, you should in fact be in the front of the room, not to have a difference between the direct sound and your telecall. Now, mostly that's what you would do. You would put people with hearing aids with the telecall in the front. If you are using the traditional Bluetooth Auracast system and you stay around 10 meters, then you should be fine with the delay. But when you are further and you are receiving at 30 meters, in fact, then the natural delay is 91 seconds. And if Bluetooth only has, well, if Auracast only has 30, 40, in fact, it's a little too fast. That is not an option. And then you can log into this Bluetooth zone that has a longer delay to match with the direct sound, and so on. So at this point, it could even add 240 milliseconds extra to have a perfect match between the direct sound arriving and the Auracast signal arriving. So that's maybe a different view on what delays are all about. So I don't think we should overdo it. Delays are important, and you have to reduce them as short as possible. But in fact, being too fast in sound is also an issue. They have to match, and that's what you need to do. And you see that in many, like if there's an aula where students are studying, they will in fact avoid having the sound coming all the way from here to there. They will typically have multiple loudspeakers at that moment, but on big events, that is not always happening. Now, when are we happy or when are we unhappy? You have seen that Bluetooth, the Auracast can be used for silent screens, as they call it, right? And then you will see that with closed fitting, things are happy because you have your broadband coming into your Auracast signal coming into your hearing aid. Everybody's happy about that. The moment that you are missing the low frequencies because you have an open fitting, and then you might have an issue because your Auracast signal, by the way, the same thing would happen if you use a teleloop, you would not hear the low frequencies being transmitted by that silent screen, and then you would miss something. And that is what we audiologists have to work on. We have to look into widening the band, maybe closing the ear, looking what we can do to make our customers happy. So we have to look into the sound quality of streaming in a good way. That calls for a specific way of fitting hearing aids, using ear molds, ensuring good sound quality. That has to match and that has to work together. And of course, we do listen, right? So yes, we did see the Budapest Declaration. We even used, you asked your president to come and present it at our mini symposium to be sure that all hearing care professionals and all audiologists hear it. And yes, we understand that while Auracast may be coming, telecalls and hearing loop systems remain proven existing assistive systems for hearing aid users today. We agree. So that is why we understand your concern. That is why telecalls and hearing aids should not disappear. And I'm a little less pessimistic than the other speaker, the other audiologist, Juliette, because typically when we ask our suppliers that are supplying hearing aids, the vast majority has a wide array of hearing aids that include the teleloops. I know there's an issue with some manufacturers of cochlear implants, but the majority is offering it and it's working. So, and I think we also keep telling them, you should not promote Auracast at the cost of the teleloop. You shouldn't do that. It's good technology. Don't talk negative about it. So yes, we support the Budapest Declaration. Yes, we do that. And we fully agree that we should combine telecall and Auracast until the full rollout, which will take at least 8 years. It may be 10, that's fine. Let's do that. So to conclude, I think, why don't we join forces? Why don't we see a happy marriage between the telecall coexisting perfectly with Auracast at the same time? I think it's best for all, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mark, for an excellent wrap-up to this session of the presentations, and hopefully everybody has been given as much as possible information. So with this in mind, I would like to give everybody a bit of breathing space. Let's take a 5 minutes break for your tea, coffee, whatever you need to do. Just move around a little bit. Our excellent captioner could do as well with having a bit of break too. And in meantime, I will be collecting all of the, unanswered questions only. And, I will be bringing it into the panel. So let's take a break for 5 minutes and we come back. Thank you. Andrew is here. So we have, some of the discussions what have been going on. One of the things which have been going on previously and the questions raised to EFHOH and to the presenters before was, for example, which are the countries which have adopted standards on hearing accessibility, and the countries which, of course, are within the European region. We don't know exactly, so I have to admit to that. And that's something what we need to tackle, hopefully next year, and working together with our stakeholders and our friends here to make sure that we cover all that information and we get the right information for everybody. There were some people asking for standards on telecoils and where they are, and standards on hearing loops too. That's a bit surprising. EFHOH website does have the information on the standard on the hearing loop. in terms of the telecoils themselves, I believe that there is very much the difference between different devices, so the audiologist receive the information on how to configure. I hope so. So Mark can always tell me yes or no, and Juliet, if that's not the case. But there are, there is one question here which wasn't done last time, and I think many people are asking similar question here in between. How is EFHOH going to campaign for Auracast to be available to all socioeconomic levels of persons with hearing loss to access Auracast with costs associated with not only the new hearing aid, but also getting the new smartphones, etc.? Well, if those kind of things are not part of the reimbursement, we cannot really do much on that, but we can work together on making sure that the decision makers do understand what accessibility is for hard of hearing people, and we can campaign together with our members. So, in our case, we need to make sure it's both. So now, Lavinia, would you like to come in? And because I know you've sent me some things. I'm double checking because there were so many questions that, we are getting confused in times as well at what was being asked. But I believe there were lots of different questions around not enough training, for example, for audiologists, and audiologists not able to pass on enough information as well to the users. Who would like to take this? Okay, Juliet, and then Mark.
Sure.
Juliet, go on.
Am I on? Yeah. Literally for the last 13, 14 years, that's what I have been doing, educating audiologists about telecoils. There is actually a Nordic standard for telecoil performance, which means if you switch from your microphone response to the telecoil response, those two match very, very closely in the frequency response, so you don't hear a volume difference. I've seen some comments in the chat about hearing loops sometimes being too loud or not loud enough. There are some hearing aids that switch to full volume when you switch to telecoil. Believe it or not, that was a manufacturer's problem, not a hearing loop problem. But the consumer has no way of knowing whether it's the loop or whether it's the telecoil, which means professionals need to quickly verify this. And I've also developed a way that professionals can quickly verify this. And I have a handout on this for any professional who is interested. But frankly, a lot of bandwidth from hearing care professionals is taken up by dealing with Bluetooth problems and linking to smartphones. That's at least what I'm hearing in the field from professionals, and it's a big issue. There's even a Bluetooth group that says, I hate Bluetooth for audiologists, just because they're so frustrated. And it's not the audiologist's fault, it's not the hearing aid's fault, it's Bluetooth being quirky. But I'm not quite sure if I totally answered the question, but I have written articles on how to verify telecoils, but the question is, are professionals taking this up? I don't know. Right. Mark?
Maybe I can complete it because since I teach hearing aid fitting at the Antwerp University, I'm exactly seeing audiologists that will work in the field. And by the way, there's a very clear standard. The typical IEC standard even has a measurement to check the reference level between the telecoil activity and the microphone. There's a good reference in there, and I'm teaching that to my students and training them. And there's equipment measuring that. A basic Oracle system will do that automatically. If you have the hitbox, you can measure it quite easily.
You need a hitbox. And yes, as you know, not many professionals have hitboxes.
Okay, but at least we train it and we show it. And by the way, there's something else, because you referred to a very old standard for hearing aid professionals, Juliette, but that has been replaced in between. There's an ISO standard, ISO 21388, which was published in 2020 and is also published as an EN standard, so it has replaced the one, on acoustics, hearing aid fitting management. right? HAFM. You should really check that one. And in that one, we have in fact consulted EFHOH, what we should write on function of the demonstration of aspects. And the demonstration of assistive listening devices and telecalls is clearly mentioned in that standard. So we have evolved since the early days. So that is happening. Is it a real problem in showing people how a telecall works, how to activate it? Is it possible? It is definitely possible. Can you do it in a proper way? You can definitely do it. But it is true that it, depending on the country where you live, that the available loops in that country can be a huge difference. And some people mentioned Italy. I agree, Italy is a nightmare when it comes to this. Also Belgium, by the way, is not doing very well. And listening to Germany, that was also not going very well. There are many countries where loops are not installed or verified properly. And if they are, they're not functioning properly. So that is one of the issues you have facing. And that's, of course, difficult for an audiologist. Because it used to be easy. If people had their classic phone and you push your classic phone close to your loop, to your call, everything was working. And then nightmare started when we started with mobile phones and because then it started to be difficult. And then you talk about please try it and please try it there in that theater or whatever. But if it doesn't work, that's a problem. And we shouldn't use it as an excuse. We should help to promote more. So we should promote now. If there are loop systems available, please double check that they are working properly. And if you want to be ready for the future, then add the Auracast transmitter at that moment to make sure that both of them are doing a good job. What I understood is that the installation of Auracast could be somewhat easier than the installation of a loop, that is for sure. On the other hand, why not combine it? I don't see, and they seem to be working and talk to some technicians doing that. Probably Andrew can advise as well, that the interference between Auracast and the rest is not really there. Also, the old excuse that a rechargeable hearing aid cannot use a coil, that also seems to be solved for most of the brands now, so it's no longer an excuse. It also used to be a problem in the beginning with 2.4 gigahertz in combination with a coil was an issue at some point, but they typically fill fixes. And I heard some people giving comments that a superpower hearing aid, it's difficult to include a telecall. Honestly, I see that most manufacturers are shielding them quite well. And the good thing is that if you have a superpower hearing aid, you can use a much wider, longer telecoil that is in fact working as a coil. So it's no longer whispering, but giving a good sound quality. So that is normally working in most cases. And I think it's essential. I do agree that for a small CIC or for hearing aids for very mild hearing losses, there the need for telecalls are lower, and we understand that, and I think we have to be realistic on that one. But for people that need more gain with closed fitting, as we mentioned at that moment, please make sure it's available as long as Auracast isn't rolled out completely.
Yeah, and I want to make one quick comment about hearing loops not working. I want to make a quick comment. Google Maps, you can write a review on Google Maps about hearing loops. And if consumers complain to their professional but don't complain to the venue, then we can't expect anything to change. And the Google information is on the hearingloop.org website. And I'm happy to communicate with people.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to give floor to Nikolai, and then with mind of the statement you just, made about the Google Maps, I think Andrew also want to come in a little bit on that and also explain another question which I will share. So, Nikolai?
Yeah, just a few comments. I think it is definitely true that the Bluetooth Classic has a number of issues. It is a system that has been built over 20 years and little bits and pieces added, and not always in the most elegant way. And frankly speaking, this is why it took so long to develop Bluetooth LE audio, because the group behind it decided we need to get all these oddities out of the system now that we have the chance to do a really major revision. So I will say that once we get this rolled out, you will see a lot of the issues that make people hate Bluetooth is going to diminish. I would not say they disappear entirely, but they will definitely diminish. I would also like to mention that there is something called the Hearing Access Committee under the Federal Communication Commission, whatever, in the US, that now rule that you should have the opportunity to pick up or to generate a signal, magnetic signal that your hearing aids can pick up, but that 20% of the phones can also use Bluetooth as a transmission means to the hearing aids. So it is moving in that direction. Bluetooth is becoming more acceptable in that space, and I think the quality is also going to be much better. And then just the last part is, when you look at the prevalence of loop systems, there's no doubt that Northwestern Europe is where most of it happens. The Nordic countries and the UK, which are the countries where the government usually pays for most of it. In other countries where people have to buy their own loop system if they want one on private funding, it changes the game a lot. And this is where there is some promise in the Auracast space, because they are inherently less expensive to acquire and to install than what you have seen with the loop systems. That's not to say that loop systems are bad. It's just saying that there are a number of countries where people are left on their own, and where the financial component makes a big difference for whether you have an opportunity or not.
Thank you very much, Nikolai. Indeed, there is a big disparity between countries, even in Europe. But also what we see is increased advocacy by our members in some countries. In the last webinar, we had Poland sharing how in the last 10 years they have increased massively access to venues, public spaces, arts, using the hearing loops and bringing hearing loops or wherever. Usually it is venues. Venues have to be required to actually to provide audio access. If that doesn't happen, then they can ignore it. And that, I think, is very important. That first question about which countries have this kind of requirement. And with this note, I would like to also bring in Andrew, who can speak more about the installation issues. We've been having this kind of discussions for years as well. But also, one of the colleagues here have written in the chat that there is a problem with electromagnetic background noise, which can be, has especially occurrence in service desks. So it is a problem. So do you find the same thing, or do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you look at the countries that have got lots of loops installed, and Nikolai mentioned the Nordic countries and the UK. A lot of those installations are driven by standards. So from the venue or the service provider's perspective, they don't see it as a return on their investment if they spend a lot of money on a loop system. So invariably they'll go out and try and get the cheapest provider. Quite often you'll find equipment that's installed is not specified correctly, it's not installed correctly. And the problem, I think, quite often is that there's no feedback from the end user, from the hearing aid wearer, that really raises the bar to making sure that the equipment's installed correctly. So it's I think from the loop manufacturer's perspective, it's an issue that's been going on for some years. And Juliet mentioned about the Google Maps and what's gone on out in the States, which has been fantastic as far as people being able to comment on their experience. And it's really there's been so many attempts, I think, to give people the tools to provide feedback, which invariably will drive the performance of assistive listening up. And from the perspective of Auracast coming down the line, I think there is still an opportunity for the more we put hearing loops in at this stage, the more opportunity there is for it to be the stepping stone for Auracast to come along and provide that future proofing for assistive listening going forward. But it is a challenge. There's no doubt it's a challenge. But the point about the interference, I think Johan mentioned it in the chat previously. There should be a check to make sure that you don't get interference before you put the loop system in. The user perspective, Juliet mentioned something similar. When they put the hearing aid to the telecoil, they don't say, oh, I've got a hum in my hearing aid because I've got magnetic interference. They just say the loop don't work. And it's the same with low volume or the loop's in the wrong place. You know, they just want to have an experience of getting sound into the hearing aid. And I suppose there is so much experience that we've learned from what's been good about loops and what's not so good, that we should be sharing that as the platform for making sure that Auracast comes in and provides the solutions that we hope it does. But there's work to do.
Oh, indeed.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And with this, I would like to give participants floor. If there is any question which has not been answered in the chat, does anybody wish to take up floor and ask a question before we close the webinar? Please feel free to come on and ask the question. Okay, many people are actually not probably having missing question, because I've seen that the chat has been like a second webinar going as always, which is great because it makes sure that people understand they are actively engaged and they want to know more. And this is important kind of discussion. And the discussion also is that, for example, there will be some countries which Italy, for example, came up that the attempt is to provide only Auracast enabled assistive listening system. That unfortunately reduces me to a passive listener, somebody who cannot use any assistive listening system if it's not actually providing me a choice. And I think the choice from today's webinar and a previous webinar is something that is coming across constantly. The users, consumers of the hearing devices want a choice. They want a control as well of what works for them and what doesn't. And one thing which is prevalent lately, and it seems to be continuing situation for us, is a race to the smallest possible hearing aid or cochlear implant processor. So we are racing towards making hearing loss invisible. And we don't want that, do we? Because we want to make sure that people feel comfortable being visible as someone having a hearing loss. So there is a big pressing kind of two different areas. Some people want their hearing loss to be as invisible as possible. Others, they really want to feel empowered by saying, no, this is what I want and I like it visible. I don't think we can make everybody happy, but we can provide everybody with the choices. And that is what we really want. So with this, I would like to close our webinar and close the meeting and thank everyone for their participation and discussions, no matter where we were. And also, I would like to confirm that we will be sharing with speakers, of course, permission. We will be sharing the information, including the standards and all the links, which we have received. Thank you so much for sending them over. And the recording also will be prepared. So, this will be sent as well. So from EFHOH side, we continue working with our friends, EHIMA, EIA, EHLMA, everybody, to make sure that we are actually speaking with one voice and provide the expertise. Because the problem is many policy makers, decision makers, those who are having the venues to be fitted with assistive devices, they need a correct advice. They need a proper advice. They need to know where to go and what is required. And I think that is something what we need to tackle, because I think we are still in a big maze, and we can't really blame people who are trying to do good, but outcome is not what they would expect. So we have to work hard on it. Thank you very much to all the speakers, and thank you to everyone who participated today. Thank you, and bye-bye.